Well, welcome to a sodden Carrow Road, where Norwich City have picked up their 8th win in 10 outings, 9th in 12. Norwich City absolutely flying, 1-0 victory here over Brentford. Happy days indeed, even though it is pretty miserable outside. And I guess one point that maybe Norwich fans will be wondering at the moment is, will this continue when the weather turns and when things get a bit stodgy? But certainly at the moment, it's looking good just because of the way Norwich City are going about things. Because if we break this one down, Norwich weren't as fluent as they have been in recent games. There were two sides that kind of match each other up, and they both play a similar kind of football and have a similar approach to things. So they didn't cancel each other out, and in terms of how the game panned out, it was still a reasonably open, entertaining game. Lots of good endeavour from both sides, and a few chances for each side as well. But Norwich had to do this differently, basically because of Brentford's approach, and that they did a great job of getting numbers out wide to really outnumber Norwich's fullbacks, which of course primarily offer Norwich their width. And it became quite clear, sort of 20 minutes, half an hour in, that Norwich were actually going to have to look to do something slightly different in terms of how they were going to go and win the game, and they did that very well. And as emphasised by the goal they scored, a wonderful long-raking pass from Tim closer down the middle, and Emi Buendia making a great run inside and producing just a wonderful finish, a top quality finish as well, it has to be said. An exquisite moment for a player who is noticeably growing by the game. Daniel Farke spoke very well of him, of course, before the game at Colney on Friday, and I thought from the off today he was excellent. He's made slow starts in most of his games and then sort of come good, but today it was all about him looking very good from the start, and really delivering some great effort and great quality through the game, and ultimately he's won Norwich the game too. So Norwich did a good job of being more direct. They had to really dig in because the second half Brentford probably had the better of it without really creating too much. That said, one key chance where Mopai hit the bar and he really had to score because it was an open goal. So, you know, they did probably have the chances, Brentford, if they'd had a bit more confidence about them and not been on such a difficult run of form. Maybe they'd have caused Norwich more difficulties, but they didn't. And Norwich did Norwich ground it out. They did a good job of mixing up and doing something slightly differently, but still making sure it was successful and making the most of their own good luck. So fair play, you know. I think that's the sort of result and performance that probably would have been a bit beyond Norwich last season. I think they would have been a little bit more idealistic, but they did mix it up. They did do enough to win it and go about it in that way, and that bodes really well because that's the mark of a good side. First and foremost, it means that nothing really screams how much they've got hold of the Championship than that result, and I think that's probably what offers the greatest hope, that they're in good form, but they're also picking up wins when, you know, maybe in past times they wouldn't have done. They would have dropped points, and obviously they're going to drop points at some point, and you know they have done. But it does offer a suggestion that teams are going to find it a little bit harder to hold them and stop them, because ultimately Brentford's plan was very good today in terms of how they were going about it. It did look like it would work. So credit there to Daniel Farke and to his players for finding a way to go and do the business. Lots of good performances again. Max Aarons, Jamal Lewis, very good, very solid, and did well because of the attention they were given by Brentford and having to adapt to that. So that impressed me. I thought the centre backs were outstanding in the second half, especially because what they did is they made mistakes. There's always one. They made mistakes, but of course what they did was they got each other out of it, and as a team, Tim Closer and Christoph Zimmermann worked brilliantly as a pair. So that's a fantastic performance from them both, really. Marco Stiepermann, if only he could come up with an end product or a final pass or not lose the ball in the final tackle he faces, because everything else he did today was brilliant in terms of his work rate, his effort, and he did some good touches, but then he'd end up following up with a bad touch. But just he's playing, we can see how high up he's playing. He's almost playing as a secondary striker, to be honest, a lot of the time, and really just a nuisance. I love it. I'm not entirely sure he's a footballer still, but what he does is effective in this Norwich City mix, and it has been for a good few weeks now. And yeah, Morris Leitner not as effective, but then that was probably part and parcel of what Brentford were trying to do, and clearly Norwich will have to deal with that. Teams will scout what Norwich do well, and they will try and stop them, and Norwich will have to come up with ways of it not affecting them hugely. I can't think of anyone else. Yeah, that was probably the standout performances. But of course, the one thing I missed out was Jordan Rhodes' penalty. Norwich should have been 2-0 up going into half time. It was the last kick of the half. It was a penalty. Max Aaron's basically hauled down by Ollie Watkins, I think it was, off the top of my head. Jordan Rhodes gets the first chance to make amends for the penalty miss against West Brom, and Bloomin' heck, he's gone and done exactly the same thing again, which is completely telegraphed where he's going to put it. A complete side foot trickled bobbler along the floor, and Bentley just falls on the ball. I don't understand why he didn't smash it. And to be honest, now let's get someone else to take the penalties, because Jordan Rhodes, top man, great instinctive finisher. I'm not buying that he's a penalty taker at the moment, and I'd rather someone else took them. And obviously I don't know who that would have been, but Norwich have got some Germans to pick through, so that could have been a starting point, really. Also, we're saying really lovely to speak to Tim Krul after the game. It's the first time we've spoken to him actually since he joined. Said some really great stuff in terms of the responsibility that he's got here as a senior player and his own experience, the doubts he had about whether he'd ever get back to the level he's at now. Personally, I still think he's not quite there yet, but Tim's really happy with how his performances are going. And it does sort of make you think, as we probably hoped at the summer, that a player like that getting himself going would be a real asset to Norwich, and I think his experience is invaluable, to be honest. And he's right, there is a really good balance between Norwich's younger players and their senior ones that they're getting to use and make the most of. One lovely point though that Tim Krul did make was he basically told Jordan Rhodes about his penalty miss, don't worry about it, we won, the penalty miss didn't cost us, no one will remember it in a few weeks' time, go and win us the game next week. Although of course he can't play against Sheffield Wednesday because of his loan, but the point still stands. And of course Norwich City head to Bournemouth on Tuesday night in the fourth round of the Carrow Road Cup, which will be exciting too. The final thing I did want to say was about Brentford, because I do kind of feel that they are in a false position at the moment. I thought they played some nice stuff. They're clearly a little bit open at the back, and they've probably got a slight identity crisis in that they've lost Dean Smith, and maybe some of the players are umming and ahhing over Thomas Frank and whether he's going to be able to get them back on the straight and narrow, so to speak. So they are in a difficult run of form, but they do seem to have a bit of quality about them. So you'd imagine they would be in a better position going forward than they are in now. But then, I thought Villa were one of the best sides I'd seen last week, and they went and lost to QPR last week. So we will see. Either way, Norwich City are flying. Long may that continue. But we have a Carabao Cup distraction at Bournemouth in midweek. Can't wait. What a trip it's going to be. We'll see who Daniel Farke opts to play, and maybe more importantly, rest, of course, as well on Tuesday night. We'll be there with you along with all the fallout from tonight's game over at PinkUn.com. Until then, have a lovely evening.